Good morning. It is Thursday, the 17th of November, and we continue our little exploration of the book of the prophet Malachi. Malachi, the last book of the Old Testament, considered to be the last Old Testament prophet, although technically we know that John the Baptist, who only appears in the New Testament, would be the last Old Testament prophet. There's also some debate as to whether Malachi came after or before or at the same time as Joel. And so therefore, who wrote their little prophetic piece first? In a sense, it doesn't really matter. It's a moot point that the academics love to argue. But I was struck in chapter 2 of Malachi, which we read today, and it's a somber warning to in the context in which Malachi was written, the priests of the time. But I believe that that warning is as relevant, if not even more relevant, to those of us who might be leaders, whether we call ourselves reverend or priest or pastor. In a sense, it's implying the same thing. It's a warning to us. Just to say, of course, that in this more New Testament time, although we might refer to ourselves as a priest, it's not the priest of the Old Testament who stands before God and operates worship on behalf of the people. So the people never approached God. It was through the priest. We do not have that in the New Testament. And there's a little bit of a history on the word priest that we use today. It's not in any way implying the same as the priest of the Old Testament. Now, in Malachi chapter 2 that we looked at today, in verse 7, Malachi gives quite a remarkable little summary of the function of a priest. And remember, this would include you and me today. We are to be people who speak the truth, people who teach the word of God, such that people will come to us to seek wisdom from us. This is the calling that we have. It includes, therefore, a form of prophetic gifting, that of speaking and teaching the truth of the gospel, but also, of course, living a life that is worthy and honorable. And Malachi challenges the priests of his day, just as I believe he will be challenging the people of God, and particularly the leaders in the church of today. In Malachi, the priests put on an outward sign of being worthy and holy, and they did so by the dress code, perhaps, that they followed, by the words that they said, by the sacrifices that they offered. But deep down, they were not in any way religious. They were not following God. They spoke words, they put on an outside air and a show that spoke of holiness, but inward they were not holy at all. And we see this happening in the wider church today. People who are leaders of the church, pastors, clergy, you name it, who will speak holiness and preach, sometimes preach quite powerfully, but they're sleeping with their people. They are stealing money. They are preaching health and wealth and prosperity as if that's all that the gospel is about. And most of the wealth goes into their pockets, not into the pockets of the people. They manipulate the word of God and manipulate the people of God. We put on a show, and I do not believe this is right and of God. And so it's a somber warning to people like myself who believe that we are called to be leaders in the church, to be clergy, to be teachers and preachers and pastors. But are we worthy of that title? So something to think about for those of us that are in leadership. And it might not only be those who are ordained in any form of senior leadership, but it could also be lay leadership in our own Anglican context, wardens, counselors, and of course lay ministers. How do we live our lives before God? Do we go to church and put on a show? Meanwhile, at home, there's another story. If only people would see, and we hide that because we don't want them to see it. So something to think about. Folks, have a good day. We'll chat again tomorrow. God bless.